Testing, testing. Are we ready? Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. If you want to come in and have a seat, that would be fantastic. Welcome to those of you that are tuning in online. I'm glad that you're joining us. My name is Sarah Punt, and I'm the Director of Christian Education and Youth Ministry here at Salem UCC in Verona, Wisconsin. And tonight our program is going to focus on youth and mental health and the issues that are important to know if you're the parent of a youth or grandparent of a youth. And by youth, I mean grades 6 through 12. This obviously applies to everyone. Our target audience tonight is our middle schoolers and our high schoolers. Throughout our 5-week program at Salem, we are focusing on mental health and mental illness as a way to end stigma so that people can live freely with any diagnosis that they have. And we also are trying to serve as a conduit for people and resources here in the local area. If you're tuning in online, you can always Google NAMI in your particular county, wherever you live in the country, and you're likely to find a chapter there with resources that can help you locally. Autumn Force is the outreach coordinator at NAMI, and unfortunately she's not well this evening, and so I have her presentation, and I'm pretending to be Autumn. So I will do my best to relay the information that she has curated and put together, and we'll go from there. So I am not licensed to give medical advice. I'm not a counselor. This is for information purposes, and if you have questions that I am not able to answer at the end, I will help you figure out what resource you need to reach out to get the answer for your question. I'll be speaking for a while, and then I'll be switching places with Michael Dorn. He's downstairs with our youth. Michael is one of the founders of Project Maria, which is a not-for-profit that deals with eating disorders. So he and I are splitting time tonight in Autumn's absence. As with all of our mental health topics, talking about them and thinking about them can be very sensitive, depending on your personal experience. If you feel you need a break, feel free to step out. I won't be offended. If you feel like at the end of the evening you need some help or someone to talk to, please talk to me. And if I cannot help you, I will stay with you until we find someone who can help you. So, let's talk about mental health. What is it? What is mental illness? What's the difference between the two? And what is stigma? And why does this matter to me? You might be thinking, I'm fine, I don't need this. But it's important for everyone to know, because you never know when somebody in your midst is going to need support. We'll review some mental health facts. We'll talk about knowing the warning signs of mental illness. We will discuss suicide awareness and prevention. And we will also discuss taking care of your mental health. And I'm going to say we're going to talk about taking care of your mental health as a parent and as a youth. So we all experience mental health. If you have a brain and a nervous system, the term mental health applies to you. Being mentally healthy means that you're able to enjoy life and feel good. Not all the time, because life is life. but overall, enjoying life and dealing with emotions and stress and challenges in positive ways. Lifestyle choices have a huge impact on your mental health. So you can maintain good mental health through good, healthy habits for your body, healthy lifestyle, good nutrition, exercise. There are some mental health myths. Being mentally healthy means that I feel happy all the time. That's not true. You can have really good mental health and be extremely sad or extremely angry. All of the emotions are important. We have them all. It's how you manage them and how they impact your daily living that's important. And then another myth is I only need to care about my mental health if I have a mental illness. That is also not true. It's the same with your physical body. You take care of your physical body through nutrition, exercise, getting good sleep, drinking lots of water. You need to take care of your mental health just as vigorously. So a mental illness is a medical condition. It's just like if you have a physical illness like cancer or chronic pain or diabetes or high blood pressure or a broken bone. It's an illness that changes the way people feel, think, and act. It's very common and it is treatable. Mental illness is not anyone's fault. Living with mental illness is not something to be ashamed of. And living with a mental illness does not mean that achieving your goals is impossible. Stigma is when someone sees a person, place, or thing in a negative way because of a particular characteristic or attribute. And some examples that Autumn put in here are skin color, cultural background, a disability, or a mental illness. Stigma is associated with labeling others, bullying, stereotypes, and discrimination. So certain examples that are stigmatizing: only crazy people take mental health medications. Homeless people are lazy. I don't ride the bus, only poor people ride the bus. So those are just some examples that Autumn laid out that show certain stigmas that people have in certain situations. In relation to mental health, stigma happens when people are viewed and defined by their illness rather than who they are as individuals. And I would say sometimes when someone has a mental illness, it is challenging to relate to them through their mental illness. So you want to relate to the person, but the very nature of the illness impacts who they are as a person. It's still important to navigate that to get to the person who's inside that illness. And stigma can be very detrimental. Oftentimes people delay treatment because they're afraid of the stigma. We watched a video in the adult Sunday school class today about a man who is a pastor, and he's also an African American. And he was struggling with depression, and he did not want to seek treatment. He was a pastor. He's supposed to have the answers. He's supposed to be able to help people with their own depression. And he already was African American. He didn't want two stigmas to navigate. So he delayed getting help for a long time. So how do we eliminate stigma? One of the ways is what we're doing with this 5-week program. We are talking about it. And I know everyone that's in this room, and I think that we all had an idea of mental illness before this program started. I've had more conversations with some of you than I've had in years on this topic over the last few weeks. So just having the conversation amongst ourselves is helping to end the stigma, because we're getting more and more comfortable just with each other talking about it, labeling it, trying to understand it, expressing our confusion over it, and understanding how difficult it can be to really understand what mental illness is and how it impacts people. We can also share links to resources on social media. So anytime you share, you see something and you share it on Facebook and 10 friends see it and one friend likes it, somebody else shares it, that's information that's being spread around. And that tells people that you're someone that they can talk to because you're willing to publicly own that topic by putting it on your Facebook page or your Instagram feed. So I have a friend whose now daughter has transitioned as a daughter, and I posted something that the UCC put out about loving trans people, and she knew instantly that she could talk to me without me judging her or her child. And I didn't have to say anything. So social media is a tool that you can use to sort of break the ice, even if you don't realize you're doing it. And don't bully, stereotype, or label others. There are a lot of jokes about, oh, this is driving me crazy, or I'm one nut away from the nut house, or, we all make jokes. It's important to maybe reframe our language sometimes so that we're not inadvertently making light of a condition that somebody is really trying to live with. And if people are using stigmatizing language, we have a responsibility, if we know better, to share what we know with them and why that language is harmful. So why should we in this room care about this? Well, we have the ability to fight stigma, and I will say that we've been doing that over the last few weeks. And we also, discovering ways to take care of your mental health as an adolescent can benefit you for the rest of your life. My challenge to the adults in the room, how are you taking care of your mental health? Your youth see you go to the gym to take care of your body. They see you select fruits and vegetables to take care of your nutrition. They see you encourage them to go to bed, and you go to bed because you need a good sleep. What ways are they observing you taking care of your mental health? That's important. They're watching you. They're watching all of us. And when we're not modeling healthy habits, healthy mental health habits, it makes it very difficult for them to know what that looks like. And as a parent myself, I will say that when I had kids at home, I didn't even know what that meant to take care of my mental health. I didn't know, I was just trying to get from bedtime to bedtime. Kara's nodding. I had mouths to feed. I had errands to run. I didn't have a job, so bless you all that work full time. And I think back, and how did my kids see me taking care of my mental health? At the end of the day, you crash in the chair and you watch a TV show, which is okay. But, I was always telling them, relax. And they're probably looking at me like, well, how do you do that? So put your own oxygen mask on first if you're a caregiver. It's the first thing they tell you to do on the plane. Because if you're not taking in good oxygen, you're not going to be able to help your young person. And if you don't know what you need to do to take care of your mental health, spend some time trying to figure that out. What quiets your mind? What quiets your soul? What brings you peace? And then try to do that. A little bit, just a little. Some mental health facts with regards to youth. 1 in 6 youth aged 6 to 17 experience a mental health disorder every year. 70,000 Wisconsinites aged 12 to 17 have depression. So if you have a young person who's struggling with depression, they are not alone. There are a lot of young people out there struggling. I do not know if these are pre or post-pandemic. If it's post-pandemic, I mean, if this was pre-pandemic, my guess is it's higher now. 50% of U.S. youth aged 8 to 15 who are diagnosed with a mental health condition do not receive treatment. And that's for a lot of very valid reasons. The mental health care system is really hard to navigate. I have a friend whose grown son moved to the area, and she reached out to me to help find mental health care for him. This was a year ago. He's still on wait lists. This is an individual with diagnosed conditions, very high risk, in crisis, is still waiting for care. So what do I say to adults who have young people they care about and are feeling that panic that I need to help my kid today? Talk to people. Don't give up. Don't take no. Just for every no you get, pick up the phone and make another call. Reach out to people, reach out to me, reach out to others, get a network going. Don't give up. The system is hard. It's not impossible. And there are a lot of resources on the back table that Autumn had left here for us when she was here a couple weeks ago. One of them is titled Navigating the Mental Health Care System in Dane County. Another one is crisis lines that you can call. And, you know, crisis can be defined in a number of different ways. You can always call to have questions. That's not necessarily a crisis, but that's a question. I'm a big believer, just keep asking until the door opens. So it's persistence, it's patience, it's asking for help for yourself as well. As a caregiver, take breaks. You know, go back to putting on your own oxygen mask. There's support groups, that there's a list back there, and there's also a sign-up sheet if you're interested. And there's support groups for all different categories of people. There's support groups for youth. There's support groups for parents. There's support groups for families. There's support groups for spouses. So they have a lot of different focus groups. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 14. That one is hard to stomach. High school students with depression are more than 2 times more likely to drop out of school than their peers. And 41.8% of Wisconsinites aged 12 through 17 who have depression did not receive any care in the last year. So, what are the warning signs? What do we need to be paying attention to? Teenagers are teenagers. Any of us that have lived with them, know. Any of us that have been one, know. It's a rocky road sometimes. We go up and we go down and we turn the corner, and 1 minute it's great and the next minute it's not. And what roller coaster are we on today? When the garage door goes up and they're driving themselves home from school, who's going to walk in the door? Which one is it going to be? The fun, happy one, or the devastated one, or the angry one, or the exhausted one? So, how do you know when it crosses a line into something more? Feeling very sad or withdrawn for more than 2 weeks. Now, I'm going to, as I said at the beginning, I'm not a professional. As parents, we're experts on our own children. Hopefully, you will know. This is a benchmark. You know, you don't have to say, okay, for 13 days they were really sad, on the 14th day they were happy, and then on the 15th day they were sad again. It's not a magic formula. This is a guideline that if they are chronically feeling something or experiencing something for a length of time, that might indicate it's moved beyond normal teenage angst. It's possible that it hasn't, but that might be the time to then reach out and seek some outside guidance. If your teen is severely out of control with risky behaviors, taking risks that can cause harm to themselves or to others, that's a sign that they're struggling. Sudden and overwhelming fear for no apparent reason. You know, sometimes just being super anxious and afraid about everything. And this can come with physical effects of a racing heart, physical discomfort, or fast breathing. Seeing, hearing, or believing things that aren't real. Drastic changes in mood, behavior, personality, or sleeping habits. Now again, teens, their sleeping habits are unique. By adult standards, they wouldn't be considered healthy. But their clocks are different. So again, you know your teen. Are they suddenly not sleeping? Are they staying up really late, watching things or playing video games, not for fun, but because they just can't settle down? Things like that is what you need to pay attention to. Or if they're just sleeping all the time. It's interfering with their daily life. And one thing that you need to really pay attention to, any of these behaviors at any time start to impact daily habits of living and start interfering with things that the youth enjoys, then that is a sign that it's moved into the problem phase. Extreme difficulty concentrating or feeling restless, intense worries or fears that get in the way of daily activities, throwing up, using laxatives, or not eating in order to lose weight, and Michael will talk more about that. Significant changes in weight or appetite, using alcohol and drugs excessively. This can signal a problem. And trying to harm oneself, attempting suicide, or making plans to do so. Those are also signs that it's time to take it to the next level of care. So these are instructions for youth. Autumn was going to be speaking directly to the youth. So what do you do when you notice warning signs as a parent? Talk to people you trust. Talk to people in the field. Get on the phone. Start calling the phone numbers. Call every provider you need to. If you have to, take them to the emergency room. Call the crisis hotline. The list of things that you can try to do is endless. It's very scary as a parent to have to navigate this. And I just say, you just keep trying. You keep trying and keep trying, and you get people to join you so that you're not alone in your efforts. And I know that might sound hollow to just keep trying, but you will break through. You will get through to somebody. You will find the help you need. Send a message to someone who cares about you, and use the available resources. Like I said, the resources that we have out on the table. You can look up NAMI on the internet. The nationwide NAMI has excellent resources for parents and caregivers. It has excellent resources for teens to access themselves. So one thing that you could do proactively as parents is when things are calm at your house, say, hey, I just want to show you this page on the NAMI website in case you ever need it for you or a friend. Not that I've noticed anything, but I just want you to know where it is. Because then when they're up at 11:30 at night and you're sound asleep and their friend is texting them, they know where to go. And they can look that stuff up right from their bedroom and maybe find the help that they need to get them started for their friend or for themselves. You just never know. Again, this is for teens. It would also apply for adults. How do you help a friend? So one thing with our teens, they live in Christian homes with Christian values of loving your neighbor. And sometimes when they have a friend in crisis, it starts to become their crisis. So my advice, and I'm going completely off script here, you really have to pay attention to that. You want your child to help their friend, but they have to set boundaries on their own mental health at the same time. I think sometimes when they're in church and they're learning about loving their neighbor, the other part of that is love your neighbor as you love yourself. So they have to love themselves too. They can't just give all of themselves away to the friend that's in crisis and allow that to become their crisis. It's very difficult as a parent to help them set that boundary because we don't always know where it is. You want your child to help them and be a friend, but your child is still a child. And so my best advice is if your child has a friend who's struggling, to really work with your child to help them navigate that dynamic and make sure that their friend is getting help. Because you don't want that to seep into your family and your child to take on something that is not meant for them to take on. Share resources around. Is sort of ending the stigma on the sidelines, ending the stigma at the band concert. Talk about things. Let people know you're open to talking about them. Like I said, post things on your Facebook page, hotlines and information. And, I think you'd be surprised how many parents are quietly walking around with this fear in their hearts. And that's actually one of the reasons I started the Parents Promise group, because I wanted parents to have a safe place to come and talk about some of these really hard things, because it is really hard being a parent of any age. It's really rewarding and it's really joyful, but the answers are not clear. And as they get older and have more independence, it is so scary because they're leaving the house without you. You just have to hope. Always be inclusive. Encourage your children to be inclusive. We all know when our children are not including other children. We all know when our child is not being included. Make sure that you're doing your part as a parent to model that behavior with other parents. And be inclusive. Your kids are watching. I know from when my kids were in activities, the problem parents had the problem kids. So don't be the problem parent. Be inclusive, be friendly, be loving. Practice your Christian values out in the community. Help your child stay positive, or your friend or whoever. Help them. You can't fix it for them. You can't make, platitudes of, oh, this will just blow over, you'll be laughing about this in 10 years. But you can be an honest, solid presence in someone's life who's going through it, whether it's your child or a friend who has a child who's struggling. Sometimes just being with them in silence, a non-judgmental presence, is enormously helpful. They don't feel alone. That's the thing. No one wants to feel alone. Check in regularly, listen, offer support, and keep reminding them of that hope that this will eventually get better. And for those that have a treatment plan, encourage them to follow it. Encourage them to keep looking for answers. They got in with a therapist, and it's not a good match. Don't just say, well, then that's not for me. It's hard to find a good therapist or counselor or someone that's a good fit for you. It has to be a good fit. Otherwise, it's not going to be as helpful. Don't be afraid to keep trying. Even though it took you 6 months to get in with this therapist that you now can't stand, keep trying. Go the distance. It takes enormous energy, but it's worth it in the end to find the solutions that help you. And it's important to know that mental health treatment plans are not one size fits all. I personally feel like this is where some of the stigma comes from. We were talking about this in the adult Sunday school class today, that the difficulty in diagnosing mental illness and the subjective criteria that they use to diagnose them, I think also adds to the stigma, because there's no blood test, there's no science that says, you have this. They have scientific ways of thinking about it now, but it's not one size fits all. The diagnosis is not one size fits all. Chances are you'll meet some of the criteria of a diagnosis, but not all of it. And the treatments are vastly different depending on the individual and the circumstances, and also sometimes what you're comfortable with. Some people are anti-medication. You know, you shouldn't be forced to take medication if that's not what you're comfortable with. However, medications have been proven to be very effective in many cases. One other thing about, when you're looking for treatment for mental illness issues, there are different types of treatment. So do your homework. I had to look up one of the ones that Autumn had on here. I'd never heard of it. Well, the first one is cognitive behavioral therapy, which I knew about. Group therapy, art therapy, pet therapy, and then this one, dialectical behavior therapy. And it's just a different way of approaching the problem. So my advice is to do your homework, look at the options, you know yourself, you know your child, you know what might work or not work for you. And if you try one treatment and that doesn't work, try a different type of treatment. My sister will be with us next week, and she will talk about the years that it took to get a treatment plan that helped. And I think that this also adds to the stigma of mental illness, is that you can be getting help and you're not getting better, and you're not getting better. And it can go on for quite a while. But don't give up hope. There are specialists, I think they're called, sorry Ellen if I'm getting this wrong, psychiatric pharmacologists. And they specialize in these medications and using them in combination for really difficult, hard to treat cases. Because not everybody responds the same way. And then there are other medical treatment options like TMS or ECT, and those are typically used in more extreme cases of resistant, hard to treat mental illness. And when it comes to mental illness, the sooner the better. Early interventions typically lead to better outcomes. And I also think that the longer you silently try to move through your struggle without help, that has a ripple effect on other parts of your life. And so the longer you wait to get treatment, not only is your treatment plan delayed, but it's having a ripple effect into other areas of your life that you will then have to move through as part of your healing process. Suicide awareness and prevention. People are afraid to talk about suicide. Saying it out loud, it doesn't feel good to say it out loud. There's a fear that talking about it will cause someone to do it. It's been proven to be a myth. So, if somebody is talking, writing, or drawing about death, that is something that needs immediate attention. If they're talking about having no reason to live, being a burden to others, and not being here tomorrow, that's a cause of concern. Looking for ways to attempt suicide, feeling hopeless, desperate, or trapped, giving away possessions, or behaving recklessly. All of those are warning signs. But the thing about suicide that's tricky, I think, is that there aren't always warning signs there. But if you see these warning signs, take action immediately. Ask outright, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about suicide? Have you made any plans for suicide? Sometimes just saying it outright, it gives them permission to talk about it. It may also make them be like, no. Don't leave them alone, and do your best to get them connected with an adult who can help. Call 988, which is the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Go to emergency room. If you call 911, ask for a CIT trained or a mental health officer. The police department, or police force in general across the nation, they're working really hard to respond to mental health calls differently. And don't keep suicide warning signs a secret. And again, that's for youth. Taking care of your mental health. So we talked about this at the beginning. So whether you live with a mental illness or not, taking care of your mental health is extremely important. Things you might already be doing to take care of your physical health that also impact your mental health are moving your body, getting enough sleep, eating nutritious foods, and drinking enough water. Start creating your own positive coping strategy toolkit. And as I said at the beginning, as adults, you should do this too. Your children will see you doing it, and they'll realize it's important. And I think very often this is something, myself included, we ignore because there's no deadline. There's no external pressure saying you've got to do your little toolkit tonight. I'll do that tomorrow because I'm feeling kind of stressed tonight. So I encourage you to come up with things that help you cope, things that you can rely on when you're experiencing troubles with your mental health. And this applies whether you end up having a diagnosable mental illness or if you're just taking care of yourself. So, and have it such that it's set up so that you can use it when you're having a problem. So here are some examples of positive, healthy coping strategies. Ask for help. Journaling or writing, listening to music, doodling or coloring, going for a walk, moving your body in other ways, mindful practices, something simple like square breathing, which is a way of doing a relaxed breathing, counting, talking to a friend or someone who cares about you, eating a snack, starting a craft or a DIY project, using a distraction like reading a book, playing your favorite game, or watching your favorite show, and asking for a hug. Now, a sidebar from me on these topics is these are all very positive coping strategies to give yourself a little bit of a break. What's important to note is to not let self-care become self-indulgence and move into an unhealthy pattern of behavior. So, watch your favorite show. Okay, carve out an hour, watch your favorite show. Try not to get into a 3-day binge of watching your show. You see the difference, Kelly? This is something I do, when I'm really stressed, I start watching a ton of TV. And it doesn't matter what I'm watching. And I'll watch for hours. And then by the time you're done, you're like, well, I just lost that whole day. That's not helping your mental health. That's actually making things worse. So, same with the eating a snack. Gotta keep that in proportion. Things that make you feel better. If you're really struggling and you find that you're going to these go-tos excessively, that's not self-care. It looks like self-care. It's moved past self-care and into an indulgence, which is not healthy. And then it's important to help your young people find these same things that help them. You've had a lifetime to figure it out, and if you're struggling coming up with something, they don't have that experience to know what works for me and what works for me in different situations. When they're younger, they have less autonomy to sort of explore that. And so it's our job as adults to give them different tools to put in their toolkit. And then they can decide what works for them. And then as they grow into adulthood, then they naturally gravitate to whatever it is that works for them. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Like, it would be easy if it said, okay, everybody color for 30 minutes before bed, and it will be just a happy nation. So, So, key points from this. Our mental health conditions are medical conditions. Mental illness is not anyone's fault. Know the warning signs and fight the stigma related to mental illness. And I guess for me, this is the most important thing. No one here is alone. I don't want you to feel alone. We are open and affirming here at Salem. You can always talk to somebody here. Recovery is possible, and there is always hope. And then here's a whole screen of resources available to us. Some of these resources, like the hotlines, are on index cards in the back. Feel free to take one if you want one. I recommend that you take them. I recommend you plug the phone numbers in your phone, because if your child comes home and their friend Susie is having a crisis, and do you want to look through that pile of papers on your desk in the kitchen to find the phone number on that postcard? Put it in your phone. Because then you have it and you know. There are some other, so some examples of what they have here. They have a suicide and crisis lifeline. They also have a text line, so you can text. A lot of young people today do not make phone calls. They would rather dry up and blow away than make a phone call. Texting is much more their medium. There's a teen lifeline. There's the Trevor Project, which is specifically for LGBTQIA and mental health resource. Young people in the LGBTQIA community are at substantially greater risk for harming themselves for a variety of reasons. There are a lot of mental health apps, and I hadn't heard of some of these. The Finch app for self-care, the Worry Watch, Headspace, Happify, Calm. And there are these 5 mental health apps in this article, which were kind of cool. Well, it would be cool, except for my husband put my thing on my computer. I'm no longer online, so that didn't work. I thought it was going to be cool. And then the Calm, the app Calm, they have these other free resources that I was interested for me. But you could use them with your youth. It's a mindfulness journal, and there are a whole bunch of free resources. There's a self-care wheel, and then there's a blank sheet for you to build a basic self-care plan for just general mental health. And that's what we're talking about, mental health. I want to be clear that mental health and mental illness are different things. Everyone has mental health. Some people struggle with mental illness. And it's when, and so we need to all of us need to take care of our mental health. And a lot of these apps and tools help us to do that. And then these are some of the other resources I've mentioned periodically. The NAMI-Dane County website is a great place. There's so much information there. There are videos to watch, self-guided videos where you watch a portion and it takes you through. There are support groups. Some of them are online. I don't know if it's just, I don't know if they're all online at the moment. Some of them are in, they're all over. There are in person. The resource guide, and then on the NAMI, the national NAMI, not the NAMI-Dane County, they have a ton, just more information. I get in there and I'll be reading something and I'll click on something and then I'm going down that little rabbit hole and I spend a while there and then I go someplace else and I'm like, wait a minute, I wanted to go back where I started. But there's so much information that, really good information. And like I said, take a tour of it. When things are calm, show your teen where they can find information if they ever need it. They're probably more likely to look it up on the computer by themselves than to ask. Because I think our children, one thing, since there are no non-Salem people here in the building, our children are all very comfortable at home. They have food, they're taken care of, they have medical care. If they're struggling, it's very confusing to them because they know they have what they need to meet their needs. So why are they still feeling bad? Sometimes we need to give them permission to not feel okay because they don't get why they don't feel okay because they're not like those kids they see on the news. They don't fit those other categories. And so, I know when Anna was in health class, they always talked about people that grew up in houses where the parents were using drugs and they were neglected and they didn't have enough to eat and now they have these problems. And it can be very confusing for someone who doesn't have those determining factors to still be wondering why they're not feeling okay. If you're not feeling okay, it doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't discriminate. So I leave you with that. Does anybody have any questions? I will do my best to answer them. That's a tough one. For those that are watching online, the question is, what do you do when someone is having mental health problems and they're refusing to acknowledge it and they refuse to get help? If they are a danger to themselves or to others, that's one story. And I think you can then, Lisa, then at that point, if they are in danger to themselves or to others, you can take them to the hospital and have them admitted against their will. If they're not, then unfortunately, that's where the caregiver needs to establish boundaries for themselves of what's healthy for them, as long as the loved one is safe. Interact with the loved one as much as you can and not the illness. That's the only thing I can think to suggest. Be an open ear, listen, keep your oxygen mask on, because it will take you down with it. And just be that stable presence, willing to be there with them. But at the end of the day, you can't force people to do something that they're not ready to do. I know, it's not a good answer.
Are aware that something has been started on this person, and so they know that there have been issues or in the past. Another thing you can do is if they're not going to get help, but as the caregiver or the loved one who is seeing that they need help, you can get help. I'm seeing a therapist, and through that clinic, I could take my family to go get help as to what we need to do for ourselves and maybe for our loved one in the future. There were so many resources out there, it's unbelievable. So anyway, I don't know if that.
Yes, thank you, Carrie. So for people that are watching online, the comments that here were specific to the Dane County area and a personal experience that they're having, and getting a case file open so that if the police end up being called or there's a situation, there's a record that there is something going on with this individual. And so hopefully it can be handled in a different way as a result. And also the importance of resources for family members, therapy resources and such that you have access to. Thank you for sharing. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the comment was that the numbers in the slide are from February 2021. So they're a couple years old, but probably reflect the beginning of the trend that we're currently seeing. I think not just with young people, but everybody, but it has substantially impacted our young people. Any other questions? Okay. I am going to, for those of you that are online, there's going to be a couple-minute break, so don't go away. There's more to come. I need to relocate downstairs with the youth and repeat this with them. And then Michael Dorn will come up and share his story, and we'll talk about eating disorders and the help for them. So if you find that you need help after this presentation or you want to talk about something, I will be in the building and will be available to help guide you. Thank you.
When I think about eating sort of technique offering, and Maria is it up. And that Maria did not start to show that the gap that with her friends and with the teachers all about Maria and Mother and work show that they're after. We have dedication as part of the way we remember her and bring some honor to what happened to her and hopefully helping people in the community. So I think we have that reference. I apologize. Yeah.
Oh, you know what? Now it's doing a lot better. It helps when you actually turn it on. I'm very embarrassed by this because one of my side jobs is I am a technical director for theater. And you think turning on the microphone would be something I know how to do. So apparently I need to go back to remedial school on that one. That's fine. So what are eating disorders? There are a bunch of different types of eating disorders. They fall into several categories. They are diagnosed under the DSM, which is the way that mental disorders are diagnosed. The main categories of eating disorders are anorexia, bulimia, ARFID, binge eating disorder, and orthorexia. There are other non-specified eating disorders which are a little more rare, but these are the main ones. Anorexia is the one we see the most often. It's characterized by self-starvation and or excessive exercise. It's usually the one we see described in the media or portrayed in the media because it's the most dramatic eating disorder because people do get so dramatically thin when they have anorexia. Anorexia is also the deadliest eating disorder. Up to 20% of people diagnosed with anorexia will eventually succumb to their illness. One thing about eating disorders that people are often unaware of is they are the deadliest mental illness aside from opioid addiction. Far deadlier than anxiety, depression, anything else. In fact, they were the deadliest mental disorder until about 5 years ago when opioid addiction actually surpassed it. But they're deadlier than a lot of cancers, but we don't hear about it a lot because it's an illness that thrives in secrecy. So, other types of eating disorders, bulimia, I'm sure you've heard of that one. That's where people purge. The purging is often done through vomiting, but can also be done through abuse of laxatives. So it's a way that people with the eating disorder can appear to be eating in a normal fashion, but they're still ridding their body of the food a different way. ARFID is an interesting one. ARFID is an abbreviation. It stands for Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder. This is picky eating taken to an extreme. I worked with a student who had ARFID, and when she first presented, she would only eat celery and yogurt. It was the only food she would eat. It was a long road getting her to eat other things. Now, some of that can be related to other mental disorders. People who are on the spectrum can often be very picky eaters. And when that gets taken to an extreme, we wind up with ARFID. In fact, that's one thing that you'll notice is very common about eating disorders, and a phrase that you'll see me use a lot is taken to the extreme. Because a lot of these are behaviors that, some of us don't like broccoli, for example. There are some people who don't like broccoli. And it might be a texture thing. It could be a lot of different things. It could be it's a very strong flavor. And that's okay. You don't have to like broccoli. That doesn't mean you have an eating disorder. But when things like that picky eating gets taken to an extreme, that's when we run into problems. Compulsive overeating or binge eating. Eating disorders aren't just about what you don't eat. They can be about eating too much. Binge eating disorder is a real problem. And binge eating disorder, when I talk to the teenagers, I say, hey, this is not normal teenage behavior of, I'm hungry when I got home and I threw a pizza in the oven and I ate the whole pizza. Okay? That's normal teenage behavior. Binge eating disorder is much more, you ate the whole pizza and you're full, but you feel like you need another one. And then you empty that 8-ounce bag of M&Ms on top of it, and maybe a whole bag of marshmallows and something else, and you can't stop. That's binge eating. It can be just as deadly as not eating. So, clean eating or orthorexia. A lot of us have sent our kids to the orthodontist. That prefix ortho means straight teeth. So orthorexia is straight eating. And again, nothing wrong with, eating in a way that is trying to be, eliminate GMOs and all sorts of things like that from your diet. That's great. But when it's taken to the extreme, where it's like, I'm going to take all fat out of my diet. That's an orthorexia problem now, because fats are an important part of everyone's diet. You need to have fats in your diet to be healthy. I'm going to eliminate all carbs from my diet. Again, our bodies are designed so that they will use carbs in certain ways. So when you start taking that to an extreme, you start developing an eating disorder. And it's something that gets diagnosed as a mental illness. Eating disorders are most commonly diagnosed among young women, ages 12 to 21. But males are currently accounting for 25% of new diagnoses, so this isn't just a girl's disease. Anyone can have it. Athletes tend to be especially susceptible to eating disorders. Probably has something to do with the obsession with body and body image and body type that is necessary to be an elite level athlete. If they're diagnosed amongst all ethnic and social groups, I'm part of several different forums worldwide of parents of people with eating disorders, and they are from all over the globe, every continent, every culture. I've seen people in their 50s and 60s in hospitalization for eating disorders. I've seen children as young as 10 in the hospital. So there's no one who's excluded, no one who's completely safe from this. But like I say, the most common onset is between the ages of 12 and 21 for young people, especially women. There are a lot of myths out there about eating disorders. First one, only teenage girls get eating disorders. Obviously not. It can be anyone. You have to be underweight to have an eating disorder. If you're of normal weight, you can't have an eating disorder. That's absolutely not true. People with anorexia tend to be underweight, but these other eating disorders can be of normal weight or overweight. And someone with anorexia, while they're in recovery, which, by the way, the recovery process for anorexia, a very short recovery would be 1 to 2 years. A typical is around 7. Some people struggle with it their whole life. So when people are in recovery, they can be of very normal weight, but they're still struggling with anorexia. So weight is not necessarily just the only indicator. Too often the insurance companies feel like weight is the only indicator, and once you reach a certain milestone, they don't want to cover it anymore. But that's not the truth. The truth is you're still struggling with the disorder. It takes a lot of time. Overexercise is not a problem. You can exercise all you want. That's not true. One way people with eating disorders often purge calories is through exercise. And we are talking, okay, I'm going for a run. I'm going for a run and I'm not going to stop to use the bathroom. That's what happens with eating disorders. I've talked to people who run places like YMCAs or gyms who've had problems with people who run on their track who do not stop to relieve themselves. They just let it go on the track as they're running. That's excessive exercise. That's a warning sign of an eating disorder. People choose eating disorders because they want to be beautiful and thin, like the latest Instagram model and stuff like that. Or Instagram causes eating disorders. Folks, if Photoshopped images caused eating disorders, every one of us would have an eating disorder. Because we all see Photoshopped images every day. Can they be triggering for people with an eating disorder? Absolutely. Very much so. Do they cause eating disorders? No. Eating disorders are all about food. As you said, it's not about food. It can be about control. It can come about as a response to trauma. It can be a genetic predisposition to eating disorders. There's no single cause of eating disorders. In fact, one of the most difficult things about eating disorders is the professionals really don't know where they're coming from. Why did this individual develop an eating disorder? Could it be a family history? Could it be a response to trauma? Could it be just a random event? And the answer to all is, yeah, it could be. But food is just a symptom. I'm not going to go through all of these because it takes a long time, but there are a lot of warning signs when it comes to eating disorders. And one thing I always caution people about is that a lot of us will experience 1, 2, 3 of these in a lifetime or see people with these. It doesn't mean you have an eating disorder, but when you see someone with a lot of these signs, then we might start wanting to talk about getting a professional evaluation and seeing if something's going on. Obviously, significant weight loss can be an issue if it's not done with medical supervision or with medical need. Having an abnormally low body weight that isn't your normal body type. There are plenty of people out there who are very, very thin and very, very healthy as a result of that. I had an uncle who was always very thin his entire life. But that was just the way he was. That's the way he was built. I had a student, she was also very thin. And her friends would, behind her back, call her anorexic. And she wasn't. She was as healthy as a horse. So we can't judge based on body type. Distorted body image, preoccupation, obsession with food, weight, and calories. I'm sure you've probably talked about OCD. There's a lot of commonality a lot of times between OCD behaviors and eating disorder behaviors. It's just that with the eating disorder, the OCD tends to be focused on food. So if you've ever seen like the Netflix movie To the Bone, it's a movie about eating disorders, a girl with an eating disorder. By the way, if you ever watch that movie, the treatment that that she's receiving, if anybody actually tried to treat an eating disorder patient that way, they would be put in jail and lose their medical license because completely unrealistic. But the woman's portrayal of an individual with an eating disorder is spot on. Very accurate. And there's a scene in there where she walks up to a plate of food and says, okay, beans, 217 calories, because there's butter on them. So 6 grams of fat. This meat, and she can go through all the nutritional information for everything on that plate just at a glance. That's the mind of a person with an eating disorder. It's an obsession with food. Eating disorders are often associated with self-injury, social isolation. Severe anxiety and depression often accompany eating disorders. Food rituals, things like cutting food into tiny little bites. So it can appear like you're eating with everybody else, but you're really taking in very, very little food because there's such tiny little pieces. Results of eating disorders are things like your hair falling out, fingernails falling out, losing the fat layer under your skin so your skin actually starts becoming translucent. It's not pretty. One of the first signs of someone who has an eating disorder is often fainting. And we've all had the experience of standing up and having a little head rush and you get a little dizzy. And that's what happens when you stand up quickly and your blood pressure can't keep the blood in your head. Eventually, the blood pressure hopefully wins and you don't lose consciousness. But when you have low blood sugar, when you haven't been eating, your blood pressure is going to drop abnormally low. You're going to stand up. You're going to go right down. It's often one of the first signs of someone with an eating disorder. For young women, losing their period is a big sign of an eating disorder. When a young woman stops menstruating, it's a problem. If she's pregnant, it's not a problem. Well, that could be a whole separate issue. No, I've talked to coaches who've said, literally, if you're still having your period, you're not working hard enough, to the girls. Which is absolutely the wrong message. If you've lost your period, something's wrong. That's a big warning sign. You're not fueling your body correctly, because maintaining that cycle is a part of normal biological behavior. So that's a big warning sign. Some people abuse laxatives or diet pills as part of their eating disorder. Some people, like I said, excessive exercise, binging, hiding food, frequent visits to a bathroom right after a meal for purging. These are all warning signs. Like I said, each and every individual thing here is something to be concerned about, but doesn't necessarily mean eating disorder. It's just when we see a lot of them. But one thing I always say is that there is no safe amount of purging. If you know someone who is purging for any reason, even just a little bit, it's only just once a week. It's only just if I've ate a little too much and I just feel uncomfortable. No, that's not safe. That's something that requires an immediate evaluation by a professional. There's no safe amount of purging. So there's the kind of information, but people always want to know, well, what's the story behind Project Maria? What happened to this beautiful young woman? And this is a picture that was taken when she was getting out of treatment one time. It was a great time because she was just in treatment for a long time. Her early years are very normal. She was a swimmer. She was a pianist. No trauma. She did normal kid stuff, getting her face painted, trying to look scary like her pumpkin. People from the outside looking in and even from within, people say, it's a pretty good life. She was doing pretty well. Now, she was shy, which we now know looking back was probably a strong sign of anxiety. But some kids are shy. Some kids just don't like standing in front of people. A lot of adults don't like standing in front of people and doing things. She played piano beautifully, but bring her to a recital, she was nervous as a cat. She loved to swim and was a good swimmer, but she eventually quit competitive swimming because she didn't like all the people cheering for her when she won. It made her nervous. So there was some anxiety there, but nothing that seemed out of the ordinary. First signs really came in freshman year of high school. She was in the marching band, and we went to a competition, and we went to Culver's. And as every one of you know, when you take a kid to Culver's, they always order a kid's meal, right? And what's the best part about them getting the kid's meal? Yeah, you get the Scoopy coupon, you get the free custard, okay? She didn't want her custard. Now, this is a girl who could eat me under the table on any given day up to this point. She was naturally a very tall, thin girl. And she had a huge appetite. But one day she didn't want the custard, and that was strange. And then the next time she didn't want her fries. And then one day we were serving pizza for dinner because we're the greatest parents ever and threw a pizza in the oven. And she was trying to eat the piece of pizza, but her hand was shaking so violently she could not get it into her mouth. And we knew we had a problem on our hands. We took her to the doctor. He said, they put her on the scale, and she'd lost 20 pounds from her preschool year physical, which had just been like 3 months earlier. This is not a girl who could afford to lose 20 pounds. Her blood work was all off. They hospitalized her. And in the hospital, she refused to eat. She wouldn't even eat the Jell-O. So they sent her to a hospital that specialized in eating disorders. And she was there for about 3-4 weeks. She learned a lot about how to eat. We learned a lot about how to work with someone with an eating disorder. And she came back home in time for Christmas. That was her first hospitalization. When you are in treatment for an eating disorder, you don't have a therapist, you have a therapy team. And a therapy team consists of a counselor, psychiatrist, dietitian, family therapist, and a family primary care physician. The counselor you might see a couple times a week, the psychiatrist once a month, the dietitian once or twice a week, family therapist probably once a week, and a primary care probably once a month. None of these people have appointments outside of school hours usually. So it means a lot of travel. And for us who live down in Rock County, there's very few services there. So we were traveling to Madison and to Milwaukee several times a week to receive services. Even if you are in town, it's still a lot of time out of school. Her first recovery lasted about 16 months. And she was doing well. but she was mainly being compliant. Her mind really wasn't healing. And one day, the compliance just broke, and she stopped eating. At that point, she stopped eating for the next 4 months. We knew that was a medical emergency. We got her hospitalized again very quickly. She went to the first place for a hospitalization. She was there for about 6 weeks. It was the same place she went the first time. And after about 6 weeks, she was still refusing to eat. They were feeding her through a NG tube, which is a tube that gets shoved up your nose and down into your stomach, and they hang a bag like an IV on there, but they pour Ensure into it. And she was even to the point where she was refusing that and pulling the tube out. And they said, she's too sick. Now, this is at a place that specializes in treating eating disorders, and they're telling us she's too sick. So she got sent to another hospital where they treated her because she had become medically unstable. That hospital was able to stabilize her medically, but at a price, because they'd have to strap her to the bed so she wouldn't pull out her tubes. But at least they were able to get enough nutrition in her that she'd become medically stable. This hospital, however, it was fantastic, but it did not treat eating disorders. So she got sent to a new hospital, and we had to find a place to take her. This time it took us to Illinois, in just a suburban Chicago area. She was there for about 6 weeks, and it was absolutely miserable. It was the most institutional place I'd ever experienced in my life. But it was miserable enough for her, and they drugged her up enough where she could basically couldn't even speak to us on the phone. But she was so miserable there, she actually did start eating again a little bit. At which point they said, she's too healthy for us. She's actually eating something. So now we have to send her someplace else, to residential treatment. Most residential treatments took one look at her and said, nope. We finally found a place in Indiana, just outside northeast of Indianapolis, that would take her. So we took her down to Indianapolis. She was there for about 6 weeks. She was eating on and off while she was there. And she also had a tendency to be one who would self-harm. She would cut herself. She'd been doing quite well, but she had a self-harm incident when she was there, and they said, nope, she's too sick for us. And they kicked her out, sent her to a psychiatric hospital that did not treat eating disorders, but treated her because she had cut her arm. Well, they kept her for a few days, but they couldn't get her to eat. And they said, we need to find a new place for her. We did a nationwide search. I think about 70 places rejected her. Finally, we found a place in Utah that would take her. So now here she is, 16 years old, and we're flying her out to Utah for treatment. She was in Utah for about 3.5 months. But she recovered while she was there. And they did a great job with her. So after about 8 months away from home, she came back. This is a picture taken in Utah, and during one of her family weekends that we were able to fly out and see her. Like I said, she was too sick for everything. She did come back home. As she returned to school, she got to go to her junior prom. This is a picture of her at junior prom. She worked at technology with me in the theater, and so she ran the sound for the Grand March, and she said, this is it, a girl and her soundboard, that's all you need for prom. She was very proud of her work with sound. She had a great year. She had a good summer. She traveled with the school to Europe for 3 weeks. She got to see Rome and Barcelona and London. She had a job. She was one of the top employees at Shopko. Well, Shopko still existed, if this doesn't date things. You worked at Shopko? Oh, there you go. So she was doing great. She celebrated a year being back home and in recovery. Like I said, the recovery process is slow with eating disorders. So we knew that there was probably going to be another relapse at some point, and it was on its way. In fact, this one was very severe. And on December 3rd of 2015, she died as a result of her eating disorder. What's life like with someone with an eating disorder on a day-to-day basis? It can be anything from very normal. There's a picture of her there in London on her trip, so a very normal teenage girl thing to be doing. The other picture is of her 15th birthday. That was her 15th birthday cake. It's pineapple and watermelon and kiwi and all sorts of fun stuff. Now, I'm not going to lie, that was delicious. Excuse me. I haven't been talking much the last week and a half, so I'm not used to talking again. My voice is going. This is going to be tough tomorrow when I get to school. Excuse me. But she wouldn't have come out if there would have been cake in the kitchen. This is her birthday cake because she was afraid of cake. Meal times are battles. One time she described it this way. She said, if I asked you to take a white hot needle and shove it under your fingernail, would you do it? Absolutely not. Of course not. Who would do that? Dad, that's what it feels like every time you ask me to put food in my mouth. That's the kind of trauma that she was dealing with internally as a result of her eating disorder. This comes with extreme anxiety. If you were asking someone to do their greatest fear, not 3 times a day, 6 times a day, when you have an eating disorder, you eat 3 meals a day and 3 snacks a day. So 6 times a day, you're asking them to face their greatest fear. It leads to a lot of anxiety. It leads to a lot of depression. There's something called the voice, which is very common for those with eating disorders. It's not a schizophrenia type thing or a hallucination. It's your own self-talk. We have self-talk in our minds all day long. For her, it was screaming. She would describe it in her journal as an abusive boyfriend living in her head. And would scream things at her like, you don't deserve food. Food is wasted on you. Nobody loves you. Stop eating. Food is wasted on you. Don't eat. Stop eating. Don't do it. And she would hear this voice, her own self-talk this way, not just when she was awake, but at night in her dreams. It would scream at her. So what can you do with someone with an eating disorder if you know someone? You see the symbol there. It's a symbol on my shirt too. It's a National Eating Disorders Association symbol. It's a sign of recovery. The painting was done by Maria as part of her therapy and recovery. First thing, if you know someone with an eating disorder, be supportive of them. If you know a family that is going through an eating disorder, be supportive of the family. This is something that impacts everybody, and they need support because this is stressful. If you ever really want to get a deep dive into what it looks like, there's a book out there called Brave Girl Eating by a woman named Harriet Brown, and she's from Madison. In fact, you may even recognize some of the names of some of the doctors that are mentioned because she did a lot of stuff at UW Health. But Brave Girl Eating by Harriet Brown is a great insight into what it's like living with someone with an eating disorder, and people need support through that process. It's one of the things that Project Maria is designed to do. You want to send positive messages to the people. They love hugs. But you can't force somebody. And this is the hardest thing to understand about eating disorders. For most of us, picking up that fork and putting food in our mouth is the most natural thing we can possibly do. In fact, for some of us, it's especially enjoyable. So the idea of not being able to do that is so foreign. It's so hard to understand. And we want to say, just eat. Just do it. And I did that. As a parent, I would look at her and say, just eat. Because I didn't understand. It's not that easy. You can't force someone into eating. You can't reward them into eating. You can't punish them into eating because nothing you do, reward or punishment, is going to be more powerful than that eating disorder. They're struggling with a mental illness. It's nothing you can just snap out of, any more than you could snap out of a broken leg. It's like saying to someone with a broken leg, just get up and walk. Now, if you're Jesus, maybe you could do that. But for the rest of us, it's a bit more of a challenge. Don't comment on their body type, especially when they're in recovery as well. People would come up to Maria and tell her, hey, you look so much healthier. Her interpretation, you look fat. You look gross. In fact, this is where we talk about, why are we commenting on people's bodies at all? Their body is their body. Everybody is different. And that's okay. If you want to compliment someone, compliment them. Wow, I really like your earrings. Gosh, that sweater's awesome. I like what you did with your hair today. Don't try to fix it. As a parent especially, as a dad, what do dads want to do? Dads want to fix it. I can't fix it. Okay? I've been working with teenagers my whole life. I have a master's degree in marriage and family counseling, which I don't practice right now, but I have that background. I was not prepared as a professional to handle eating disorders. Very few mental health professionals handle eating disorders because they're very difficult to handle. So don't try to fix it yourself. Let the professionals work at it. Don't get involved in power struggles because you aren't going to win. Nothing you're going to do is more powerful than that eating disorder. This one is huge. Don't promise to keep it a secret. Eating disorders and a lot of mental illnesses thrive in secrecy. I don't want anyone to know. They're going to look at me funny. So what? Secrets, especially when it comes to eating disorders, secrets kill. The sooner an individual with an eating disorder gets into treatment, the better the outcomes tend to be. The greater the chance of survival. But too often people don't say something because they don't want to get them into trouble. They don't want to get them labeled. They don't want any, well, you know what? Who cares? Get the label, get the help, survive, and recover. Secrets kill when it comes to eating disorders. Like I say, I'm with a group called Project Maria, and this is what we do. We educate people about eating disorders. That's one of our missions. Another huge part of what we do is we work with families and individuals with eating disorders. And we have several different families we're working with right now whose students are either in treatment or just out of treatment. And we help them find the resources. We help them work with insurance companies. We help them do all sorts of different things. Everything we do is free. We don't charge for anything we don't. We are not treatment providers ourselves, but we just want to be a resource to help people understand what eating disorders are and to find the help that's necessary so that people have better outcomes than what we had. Maria had some of the best treatment she could have possibly gotten. She was just too sick. Eating disorders are, like I said, aside from opioid addiction, the deadliest mental illness there is. So it's something that requires that professional help. We do also have support groups that we offer. If you know somebody who's dealing with someone for a family or a caregiver of someone with an eating disorder, that's offered both live in person and virtual once a month. We also have the support group for people in recovery. Now, most of our support groups are in the Janesville area because that's where we're based out of. We're based out of Rock County. But a lot of our resources, Rock County doesn't have resources for this for the most part. So a lot of our resources are in Madison. So our website can be very valid as far as finding resources for people in the Dane County area as well. Like I say, everything we do is free. A lot of our stuff is on our website, projectmaria.org, or you can find us on Facebook. And that is my presentation. Thank you for your attention. Are there any questions? I don't mind questions. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm going to do this 5 more times this week. How angry was she with me? I think it's hard to describe how angry she was with me sometimes. She would hit me. She would scream. There were times where she was so angry, I wasn't sure what she would do. There were times that she was so angry we had to call the police. It's not unusual. Yes, she did. She understood what the problem was. One thing that's really interesting about people with eating disorders is they tend to be high-functioning individuals. Not exclusively, but I would say 75 to 80% are well above normal intelligence, and they understand that they have a problem, but the problem is so severe that they can't get past it. She understood she had a problem. She understood what she had to do, but that self-talk, that voice, was so pervasive. And I think if any of us had that constant input, just you can try to create all the intelligence and thought about it that you want, but it's very hard to overcome that. Yeah. Oh, I'm doing, well, I've got health classes that I'm teaching this week at the high school I teach at. I do this every term. So every freshman at the high school I work at gets to hear her story. I've got another church down in Milton that I'm going to be speaking at, Methodist church there. Actually, sorry, that's a Janesville church. I've got the Milton Public Library as well. So, I mean, it tends to come in bunches. I'll do it 6 or 7 times in a couple weeks, and then I won't do it for 2 months. But yeah, I do this presentation quite a bit. I talk to a lot of people. So, yes. Yes, DBT seems to be the therapy of choice, dialectical behavioral therapy. That's mindfulness. There's a lot of mindfulness involved in there. Looking at, I'm not an expert in DBT, but one of the things I use with a DBT technique I use a lot with people I'm working with, and even with students, because I've been a teacher for 34 years. When people are having anxiety attacks or something like that, in my classroom, I'll often use a DBT technique, which is, okay, look at what are 5 things you can see right now? What are 4 things you can hear right now? What are 3 things, and get them to engage their senses. What can you smell? Kind of a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So engaging the senses, just kind of grounding yourself. So DBT helps people when they're going through the anxiety of whatever it is they're dealing with, whether it be an anxiety attack or an eating disorder or something. Focus on that. One of the places we had her hospitalized is doing a lot of work right now with biofeedback. And they've had quite a bit of, they started that shortly after she left. They went kind of deep into that, and they've been having a lot of success with some biofeedback techniques. So there's a lot of stuff out there. The problem is there's no, like I say, they really don't know where it's coming from. There's a lot of pharmacological interventions that are tried. But as you know, with any mental illness, picking the right med is a shot in the dark. And sometimes it makes it worse. So that's kind of what they're doing right now. Yes, sir. Oh, we could be here for a long time if we start talking about health insurance. My wife works in the medical industry, and I work with, like I say, I'm a teacher, but I've worked with prior to Act 10, a lot of negotiation work with the unions and stuff like that, so I was very familiar with medical insurance people and stuff like that. We were fortunate from that standpoint because the insurance did not want to cover a darn thing. We had to fight tooth and nail. Literally to the point where we had contacted lawyers who specialized in eating disorders and had threatened to sue the insurance company more than once. And we were to the point where I had been approved to take out a new mortgage on my house to pay for her treatment because they weren't going to do it. And then we finally dropped the lawyer's name in front of them, and it was a national firm that specializes in taking insurance companies apart. And they're really enthusiastic about doing it. And funny, we dropped that name, and 2 days later we got a letter in the mail saying that everything had been approved. So, but yeah, we had to fight and fight and fight, and it was a constant, ongoing battle. And we counsel a lot of people on how to fight insurance companies and how to get an individual case manager assigned to your case, so you're not just talking to whoever pops in on customer service on a given day, that you always go to the same person every time. You get a lot of single case agreements written, things like that. It's a battle. There are mental health parity laws, but if you've noticed over the last 5 or 6 years, in order to get around them, what they would do is they'd say, okay, you could get residential treatment for up to 90 days for alcoholism or something like that, but mental illness would be like 30 days. And we use those to our advantage, saying, hey, parity law says you have to give us the same. The insurance companies have now cut everything else back to the 30 days or 21 days. So instead of increasing coverage for mental health issues, they decrease coverage for everything else to match the parity law. So, yeah, the battles with health insurance have been epic. And it was a very time-consuming thing. Yes, sir. We do have another daughter. Do you have any other children, and how did our family manage it? We do have another daughter. She's actually a senior nursing student right now at Edgewood College. She is about 3 years younger than her sister. It was very hard on her, watching her sister go through this. I mean, it's her big sister. She adored her big sister. And it's something she's dealt with more. She struggled. She was always the one who always I always call her my I do it girl. And when she was 1.5 years old, her first word phrase out of her mouth was I do it when I was trying to get her dressed one day. And very independent minded. And she tried for, I think, through most of high school to just deal with this on her own. And in college, then she wound up getting a little help with it, finally, after much encouragement from us. And she's in a good place, I think, with it. She doesn't talk to us a lot about it, but she's in a good place with it. She's dealt with it, and will continue to deal with it for the rest of her life. I mean, losing a sister is something you never get over. So, but she's our only other child. I love it. You guys ask a lot more questions than the kids do. Kids are always like, I'm too scared to ask. Oh, thank you. Thank you for listening. And like I say, if there's ever anything that we can do to assist somebody, that's what we're there for. Thank you.